Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Tabs. I'm with Malaya, USA. Thank you all for hopping on our What the Fact, a discussion on social media, disinformation, and the Philippine elections. We are just waiting on a few more people to hop on, quite a few more people to hop on. So sit tight. Think about questions y'all might already have about disinformation, social media, and the elections. And looking forward to having a great discussion with everyone. And feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're from, and what brought you out here tonight. Thank you all again for coming. We'll get started soon. Hang on tight. We're waiting on more people to hop on. If you are on Facebook, the subject matter for much of our discussion tonight, we're also live streaming on Malaya Movement USA's Facebook. And we'll be sharing calls to action throughout the event today. So please stay on and yeah, be thinking about questions y'all will might have already. And we'll get started in about a minute here. Okay, I think we can get started here. Again, thank you all. Maraming salamat for coming out today. My name is Tabitha. I'm the Vice Chair of Malaya USA, and I'm part of the Trolls and Tyrants Campaign Working Group, a campaign to end the weaponization of social media. We launched the Trolls and Tyrants campaign last year, really in response to the rampant terror tagging we were seeing from the Duterte regime. It was clear to us that the Duterte regime has really used social media not only to prop up his own regime, but to also demonize his critics, Malaya USA being one of the targets of their disinformation and misinformation campaign. And no doubt, we know already, we've seen already, social media will play a key role in this election cycle. This really is a critical discussion with less than 100 days left until election day. So thank you again for joining us. Please share the live stream on Facebook and get other folks to tune in. Can you go to the next slide? Just some quick webinar reminders. So again, this webinar is being recorded and live streamed. Everyone is on mute to minimize sound, but please do send your questions to the person labeled questions in the chat. There will be a really great Q&A session portion of this event today after our speaker gives his talk. Please also, we want to encourage a lot of people to partake in the discussion. So share your comments in the chat box, but also join the conversation also on social media. Add the hashtag trolls and tyrants so that we can find you. We've got a super simple program for tonight. We have a speaker from the Philippines who will give us an overview of the issue of disinformation as it relates to social media and the elections. And then we'll have about 20 or 30 minutes for questions at the end of the event. But again, please be on the lookout for calls to actions from us. And yeah, excited to get this going. Can you go to the next slide, please? So yeah, with that, I welcome Albert Pagunsan, the Program Director of Fact Check Philippines. Fact Check Philippines started as a coalition of civil society organizations and citizens in 2007 after the 2016 elections. The organization provides educational discussions and fact check reports and organizes with other civil society organizations to combat fake news. So giving you, Albert, the mic and take it away. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Tax, or thanks to Vita for that introduction, and thank you, Malaya USA, for inviting us. I'll be sharing my screen right now. So, okay. So for today, I guess for tonight, of course, from where I'm at right now, it's already morning, but where many of the viewers we have right now might be already evening or night. So good day, good evening to everyone. Wherever you are, I hope that you are in a safe place right now or in a healthy place. So for this session, I'm going to be talking about the importance of fighting fake news in the 2022 elections. And just want to share, because I already talked to Tabitha about this. I used to also do a lot of organizing work before I joined Fact Check Philippines, and I'll be emphasizing parts of the discussion where I feel like Malaya USA and many of their affiliate and partner organizations might also feel related to, or might feel that it resonates with them, because when I was doing also organizing work, I've also got my fair share of being red tagged and being part of many disinformation campaigns by the people who were really against the campaigns that we were running, which were also focused on human rights and issues like anti-terrorism law and stuff like that. So I guess this discussion will focus on multiple personalities. Either they might be benefiting from fake news, misinformation, disinformation, and it will also be focusing on people who are the prime targets of fake news, disinformation, and misinformation. So I'll be sharing this. This is one of the very few fake news, misinformation, disinformation that Fact Check Philippines was first to debunk, and only thereafter other organizations were able to highlight and expose this wide network of accounts and pages that were spreading this type of fake news. So the fake news claims that the current presidential aspirant, Bongbong Marcos, the son of the former dictator, graduated from Oxford. And we were a bit surprised because we were receiving a lot of requests for this until we decided, okay, fine, let's do this report. And you know, when we started releasing the fact check report, a lot of people were laughing because they did know that the current presidential aspirant did not graduate from Oxford with a degree, but rather with a special diploma. But it's an issue that they keep on revising, and for multiple times, you were able to revise the profile of the former senator and current presidential aspirant. So it gets a bit confusing. And this is the fact check report that we released. Of course, it's not fake news. He did go to Oxford, but he wasn't able to finish. And additional information from our partners like Verifiles and Rappler were able to release reports that for him to be able to get the special diploma some diplomats and politicians from the Philippines had to pull strings in Oxford University for him to at least get a special diploma. So why am I emphasizing this? In the Philippines, the premium that we place on a college degree is very high. Gives people a lot of opportunities that it might shock them if they know that their leaders are not, let's say, high school graduates or college graduates. So somehow we felt like coming from Fact Check Philippines, a lot of people found this claim to be very funny because a week before this fake news broke out, we did a fact check report on a similar issue, and we placed the freshman photo as one of the sources to prove that he did go, but he wasn't able to graduate. And surprisingly, fake news networks spun that narrative by saying that it's a graduation photo. It's not a graduation photo. It just happens to be a class photo. So days after, through that very simple fact check report, multiple news outlets in the Philippines and abroad were able to report that it's actually false. You know, he wasn't able to graduate, but he got a special diploma instead. Until now, even if many fact check reports were released, we still get a residue of fake news reports about this, and in multiple ways that it's very difficult to fact check already because they mixed it with multiple lies. And it's very hard to unearth those lies when you have lies and lies and lies on layers of them. But I guess right now, where the fact check campaign is, it's okay so far in the Philippines because many groups have collaborated and created coalitions to fight this. So right now, the turnover rate is a lot faster with big networks and big newspapers doing their own fact check reports, alongside with small organizations, student organizations, civil society doing their fair share. So why is social media an important issue for Filipinos here and abroad? In the Philippines, this is statistics for the Philippines. Filipinos in the Philippines use 10.6 hours for the internet, which means that 4.15 hours are used for social media. And if you go to Manila, the capital city, you would see this happening. Like most of the time, people will be glued to their phones. But if you also go to the provinces where there's low bandwidth and people do not have access to really quality internet connection, they still are able to access the internet because of free data or free Facebook, which I heard earlier that one of the few steps that we're taking as a broad coalition right now of civil society members, even coming from Malaya, is to hold social media companies accountable or to force them to enforce their community guidelines. So in this case, the reason why a lot of Filipinos like to use Facebook is because culturally people like to feel connected, which is right now the campaign strategy for troll networks and fake accounts from our perspective is to really try to make the fake news content organic as much as possible. So they would employ TikTok, they would get influencers to spread fake news, and they would also use your relatives to do that as well. You would see and fact check some accounts and some individuals that are not known at all, but within their communities, they are influencers. Like they get a like of like, they get likes, 100 likes for each post or 50 likes, so that even if it's small, it's already substantial enough if you have 100 accounts doing that or 100 influencers doing that. So in Fact Check Philippines, what we do right now is we try to get a glimpse of how the network looks like, and we try to reach out to Meta to at least investigate whether that network is connected or not. Because to be fair, Meta did see that there are networks that are being controlled by certain individuals. They did take down a network that was controlled by military officials and by a department in the Philippines, and they got flack for that, and they got red tagged as well. So it's a bit funny that even Meta is claimed to be part of the whole CPP NPA type of narrative that people in power or powerful people are trying to peddle, which obviously is fake news. So I guess that's the reason why we spend a lot of time on the internet. People really want to feel connected to the Philippines, and there's this phenomenon of being a marites. So people like to always spread rumors and talk. So that's why they spend a lot of time on the internet, and people are using it against them by spreading fake news and trying to get influencers to talk to them and even privately messaging them to an extent to recruit them for various political activities that are connected to fake news and disinformation. So that's in 2021. I think in 2022 it might be a lot bigger because a lot of people want to get information about the elections. According to Pulse Asia, which is a reputable statistical organization here in the Philippines, or an institution that surveys, almost half of Filipinos in the Philippines get their information from Facebook, while only 10% use news sites to get information. So there's a huge disparity of people who use Facebook to be informed, and they might be also be a huge disparity between people who use TikTok to get information, people who really read news sites or go to news sites to get information. But I guess from Fact Check Philippines, we think the reason why people do get their information from Facebook is, again, it's because it's free. And perhaps you might be also seeing the similar case in India, where a lot of people are also bombarded with disinformation campaigns against certain religious groups, to forward a narrative, by another group as well. So they also have access to free Facebook, but because of that access to the free network and without access to quality information through news sites, people are likely to be misled, to be misinformed, and to be disinformed in the process. So how does fake news affect the lives of everyday Filipinos? I'll be showing examples here of how it does affect Filipinos in the Philippines right now. So first is I know that most of us are familiar with pancit or sotanghon. We might have had it for dinner or during family fiestas or dinners or parties, Filipino parties. It's a bit of a staple because it's very affordable to prepare. So 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we did a fact check report on this during the pandemic, I guess. It was fake news spreading that when you eat sotanghon, it 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 will just blast, or it's flammable. And because of that nature, a lot of people started were concerned about sotanghon. And in the Philippines, when you go to carinderias, it's a staple. People buy 10 to 15 pesos for it if they can't afford ulam, or if they can't afford dishes to pair with rice, so they buy sotanghon instead. So I guess we had to reach out to Good Life, and they got a statement out saying it's fake news and that their materials aren't flammable, materials that they use to make their pancit sotanghon or their pancit canton or whatever it is. The way I would explain this to Filipinos here in the Philippines is that it's an important issue because if a lot of Filipinos are misinformed about the nature of pancit, then a lot of carinderias will close down, and a lot of people will shift to brands that are a lot more um, expensive and not affordable and accessible to the common Filipino. So we're thankful that this didn't really spread that much and people still consume a lot of sotanghon. When I was growing up, there was fake news against KFC, McDonald's, and Jollibee saying that if you eat a lot of chicken, you'll become gay or you'll become queer. So I mean, like, our batch didn't end up that way, but there are a lot of queers from the batch I graduated with, and I'm queer myself, but I don't think that it's because of KFC. So misinformation is that rampant here that even food and medicines happen to be also the common objects of misinformation, disinformation. I guess this one's the next one, and I think that this one, from my personal perspective, it might have been exported or imported from the United States or from Europe because, and I would agree that the president might have been misinformed by few of his experts, or he might have also been using Facebook or Twitter to get information because the fake news that he was able to mention actually was already fact checked by reputable organizations like Reuters, Pointer, and other fact check organizations to fact check organizations in Europe and United States. So what we do in fact check organizations or fact check network is that we look also what other organizations are doing and we try to duplicate or replicate that. And it's a fine practice. It's not like in school you get penalized for being plagiarist. Within fact check organizations, it's fine because the main goal is to spread the information as much as possible. So we're thankful that the Department of Health and many civil organizations and people out of there and also NGOs were able to have information campaigns. And right now, I guess most of the urban areas have a 60% to 80% vaccination rate. But it's a bit different if you go to rural areas or areas located in mountainous regions. The vaccination rates are very, very low. So that's where much of the focus is right now. I think the next fake news is also related to this, and this one was because so I don't think the sound. Ariane, I'll just be sharing the video. So this is actually a video of people who rushed to vaccination sites in Metro Manila, in different areas of Metro Manila, because 3 days or 4 days before this, the president was threatening people, if you don't get vaccinated, I might not let you get out of your houses. And most of the people at that time were still hesitant because of certain brands they might not prefer or they have certain concerns with. And they imposed lockdowns in Metro Manila at that time. So a day before the lockdown, a lot of people were outside malls and outside schools and outside government centers, and they were there in crowds, and it was a bit concerning because there was no social or physical distancing. And I think what news organizations and coming from Fact Check Philippines, we discovered it was because 4 days or 3 nights ago, the president threatened people, but it wasn't policy, but people interpreted it in a way that it was policy. So I guess a lot of people were harmed in that process, and I hope that they are safe now because Metro Manila has really high vaccination rates. So this was just really disappointing, you know. So I'll go to the next slide. So I think that this is the last slide that I'll be talking about the people that are being targeted. From my observation from Fact Check Philippines, most of them are actually women. We have Vice President Lenny Robredo, who from her first day of office has been the number one of the top targets. And then we also have Laila De Lima, who were among the liberal personalities who were very outspoken against war on drugs. And we also have the person down here is Manang Zara Alvarez. You might have known her because within human rights organizations network, she's one of the staunch advocates for land reform and staunch advocates for human rights issues in the Philippines. And I worked with her, and she got gunned down, and it's because of the fake news that was spreading around that she was, an NPA or a CPP NPA. So I guess that this issue is somewhat more personal for many fact checkers because we do know people within our networks who died or who were injured or who were harassed because of fake news. We also have Pia Ranada, who was just asking very, very provocative questions to the president, and she got banned from the Malacanang for asking those questions. We also have Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa, who's facing multiple cases for the articles that they published that were very critical of certain personalities. On the right side, you might be less familiar with this, but her name is Jandil Nasperos, and I also worked with her when I was still a student in UP, and she was one of the student leaders at that time, and she was a victim of fake news 4 days ago because they name dropped her through fake news networks as the main person who was threatening presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos to be assassinated. So that was fake news, and that was pointed out by news organization that it's not true at all. So I personally know her, and I worked with her in some projects. So it's a bit concerning. And lastly, we have Sara Ilago, who is also Kabataan Party List, current Kabataan Party List representative. She also got her share of fake news of being affiliated with CPP, NPA, and being involved in a lot of violent activities, right? That can be considered crime here in the Philippines. So if you notice, most of them are women, or all of them are women. When you look at the number of people are being victims of fake news. The other person here, of course, is not a woman. Kiko Pangilinan, I wasn't able to include him here, but he also got a lot of fake news against him, like being, close to Joma Sison and being like a lapdog of the Communist Party and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this is the state I wanted to emphasize this because it's a bit gendered when it comes to fake news. Of course, there are male politicians who got their fair share aside from Kiko Pangilinan, Isko Moreno, Manny Pacquiao. They were also victims. But with regards to the number of fact checks that we were able to do, most of the victims were women. And that's our observation as an organization, but it's not scientific. But again, it's an observation. Verifiles did pinpoint, and some of the fact check organizations did pinpoint Lenny Robredo, Laila, Maria Ressa, and Sara Alvarez top victims. And Verifiles did also mention them, Lenny Robredo to be specific. So how do we choose candidates? In the Philippines, social media plays a big role because people don't read that much of newspapers anymore, because aside from the fact that you have to purchase them and people here live below $2 a day or $3 a day, they would rather use that for other means or for other needs. So, but when we go to elections, we always use information that's accessible, understandable, and readable. In the Philippines, it's I don't think that people read a lot, but they do read a lot on Facebook. But there's no that much of a reading culture when it comes to newspapers. And if you do read newspapers, you're more likely to be upper middle class or upper class, or you're part of the academia or the business sector. So much of the people, or many of the people here in the Philippines, really use Facebook and social media networks to get their information because it's entertaining. It's very similar to television. And if you don't have access to television or smartphones, you're more likely to also use radio as your source of information. And we're thankful because radio networks right now are slowly trying to understand that they too might have unconsciously been amplifying fake news, because some of their broadcasters might have been exposed, and because that they weren't able to fact check it, they shared it with their listeners live. But I guess that that's a development that I would be happy to share, that there is some effort to recognize the spread of fake news. So the types of fake news that have been spreading since October 2021. And some of the stuff that I included here might be funny to you, because I just also wanted to keep the matter light. Fake news is funny most of the time. So we have fake quotes. One of the victims of fake quotes is Pope Francis, and Pope Francis is an influential figure in the Philippines because most of the people here are Catholics. So there was a fake news card after All Souls Day or All Saints Day that was spreading that Pope Francis endorsed by presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos. So it's untrue. The code card actually came from ABS-CBN. We were able to alert them as soon as possible as well, and they released a statement saying it's not from them and it's untrue. We also have Miss Universe, third runner-up or second runner-up, Venus Ra. She's part of this Christian organization that's also being very active in elections, making sure that people who are corrupt or who are against Christian values do not get elected. So her video didn't mention any presidential candidate or aspirant, but she became again a victim of fake news. And again, like, notice that she's also a woman. Um, so the organization did release a statement saying that they didn't endorse anyone. It's all fake news. It's a hoax. But it kept spreading. After we fact checked it, there were some TikTok accounts still spreading that type of fake news. And then we have these statements in comment section. I think it might be worth mentioning that Facebook should also start an option where people can report certain comments for fake news or for investigation, because I guess it's one of the few very insidious ways that people are now spreading fake news. And it's also very difficult for us to track fake news when it's also been spreading through Viber groups, WhatsApp groups, Telegram, and even Facebook Messenger. The fact that it's a private conversation is very difficult to verify. So what our people do in the organization and network is they send us screenshots instead, and we fact check them. And we have fake photos. This photo is fake. The original photo is tendera in the local market, and it's not Lenny Robredo at all. And the photo was taken actually by citizen journalist for GMA News. Then we also have this photo. It's obviously fake. Sometimes people might call us out. It's just a meme. But the reason why we still fact check them is because there are some reasonable number of people who do believe them, and they start sending them in their own networks, and it's very difficult to control by them. So, and this is also another photo. So red shirt protesters were being called as Marcos supporters, but they're from Thailand, but they use that photo instead. So fake photos. We then have historical revisionism. This is actually a real photo, but nilagyan lang, or they just manipulated it and put a photo of Ferdinand Marcos. It's untrue. He's not a war hero as he claims to be and claimed to be during martial law. The US military actually released a statement saying that it's untrue. I think many years ago. And then we also have this fake news. We were actually we were the first to report this. And yesterday, we found it very funny because Rappler and some fact check organizations had an alert that this was spreading again. And it's very funny because people were pointing out in the comment section that it's untrue. It's just satirical material. But people started spreading this surprisingly, and they did believe that Bongbong Marcos was the first man in the moon. So a lot of the Filipinos in the comment section were saying that you need to go back to elementary school and stuff like that. And yeah, and this is also another outrageous claim. They claim that the Philippines made has like 400,000 metric tons of gold, and they loaned all of that gold to countries like America, Europe to start the World Bank and um, IMF. So it's again untrue. We only have 200,000 metric tons of gold, or 190 to 200,000 being mined so far. And yeah, this is also another historical revisionism. Of course, they did go against Marcos eventually at the end, but now it really has been trying to discredit the same movement he was part of. So it's a bit tricky right now, and he's somewhat an ally of the Marcoses because he frequently appears in their videos. So we also have electoral fraud, and I guess this is something that uh, that's very familiar to Filipino Americans and Americans in general, because we've been noticing from Fact Check Philippines, because we often also monitored what was happening in the United States, because what's happening in the United States usually also impacts the Philippines, especially in fake news. I'm reading this book about how they created this huge misinformation, disinformation, and fake news machinery for Trump and against Hillary. And I'm very surprised it's very similar to what they're applying here right now. So there is wide news of electoral fraud that happened and will happen. So it's just funny because this is a very touched issue for most Filipinos, because they still have a lot of trauma from what happened in the 1980s, where a lot of people were killed during elections just for Marcos to win and stuff like that. But the 2016 elections were one of the relatively cleanest elections, and the Supreme Court was clear in saying that there was no electoral fraud. But this is a new version of the fake news that's spreading around, that if you vote for Bongbong Marcos, Lenny will come out. This is also the same fake news that they've been trying to replicate during the 2016. It's untrue. And it was spreading in Reddit. One of the people in Reddit called us out and said it's just sarcastic, or sarcasm, or satirical. But people did pick this up, and they started spreading it around political groups, and people were alarmed. So I guess the Philippines might not be very familiar with satire. We are familiar with comedy. A lot of comedy skits do criticize politicians, but we're not familiar with satire. So that's the tricky part here. Glenn Chong is also famous for spreading the electoral fraud issue over and over again since 2016, to the point that even his personal bodyguard, who was killed by the police officers here. It might have been a case of police brutality. He accused the police of conniving with Comelec, conniving with different political parties just to kill the bodyguard. So there was no evidence to support that, but they said it was a different issue, something some, they didn't mention the issue. So I don't think that's electoral fraud. And then I guess this one recently, the Comelec was allegedly hacked. Comelec says that they were not hacked. Some agencies do not believe so. They say that there is a possibility that they were hacked. So they started linking it up with groups like Lenny Robredo and Kiko Pangilinan scam, stuff like that. They were able to release a statement. They had nothing to do with it, and they condemned those acts as well. And yes, this is another photo. They were only just one party. The party was just a birthday party, but they twisted the issue. This was actually a photo taken in 2016, and they said that it was like a meeting. So it's just weird. Then we also have red tagging. I mentioned this earlier, the people who have been red tagged so far, and in the Philippines, it's a very important issue because until now there are people who believe that people who criticize the government are actually uh, rebels or people who take arms and stuff like that. Then we also have vote buying as early as January. This was spreading. Okay, so simple ways to identify fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. So I guess be meticulous in reading titles or headlines. In the Philippines, people have a difficulty in this or with this because they oftentimes think it's legitimate news because it's from YouTube or it's from Facebook. And the language used here is actually very similar to the showbiz news segments that we have. So it's very difficult for them to decipher or to separate or identify. Then who wrote the article? Where was it published? And I think I've been mentioning this earlier. Satire is a very difficult material here in the Philippines because it can pass as fake news and it can also pass as fiction. That's why I think for this case, we did call this fake news, but it came from a satirical website. And it's also not clear it's satire, right? So it's important for us to identify who wrote it, to make the person accountable. And where was it published? It was published in a satirical website. Photos can also be misleading. So these are photos of universities, medical center, and even a shopping mall in the Philippines. They said that they declared a support for a certain presidential aspirant, Lenny Robredo, because the color is pink, but it's untrue. The context of these photos are they made those colors visible because it was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. For the La Salle, they colored their building pink because they wanted to celebrate their world rankings. UST, which is Pontifical University in the Philippines, we're just in pink because it's the Advent color in Catholicism. And Ateneo in the top left, it's just a filter, that you can find in whatever photo filter app that you have. Check other news sites and legitimate pages for additional information. So they've been spreading misinformation that Maria Ressa can't answer the questions in this interview. But the context is the questions are really hard to answer in the first place, and many people who were part of the show were also having a difficult time to answer those questions. So I don't think that it's appropriate. And also, one curious thing to note, what fake news networks are also doing is that they're trying to pretend to be institutions that are NGOs and civil society organizations. But if you look at their whole website or whole Facebook page, you have nothing to do with NGO work, civil society work, organizing. It's just full of fake news articles. So behind the facade of being an NGO or CSO on Facebook, they spread this type of disinformation. It's I'm mentioning this because their cover photo looks like as if it's a UN organization or like an NGO, and they're able to get away with it. So maybe it's just a joke. So Nicki Minaj should not declare support for any presidential aspirant. In the Philippines, a lot of Gen Z and millennials like to joke about political issues, but when you're older, when you're part of Gen Y, you're a boomer, you might not know that it's a joke. And here's another joke that has been spreading around. And we also, I wasn't able to include here, Mia Khalifa also was had her share of fake news. She was called like Princess of Saudi Arabia, and that she declared support for presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos. And people were thanking her, saying thank you to the Princess of Saudi Arabia. And other people, especially Gen Z and millennials, were laughing, saying that it's a porn star, or that she used to be a porn star. She's not the Princess of Saudi Arabia. So in this case, Jimin from BTS declared support. It's not Jimin, it's actually Ollie London, an influencer who claims to be transracial and is very controversial figure in YouTube. So check your biases. I also want to share this because this person actually lost her job. That's what we heard from activists and OFWs from Dubai. She lost her job because hours after she posted this, the company was alerted, and the company happens to also own the same building where the fake news was posted. So it's a very sad news to hear. And at the same time, but I think that at least she didn't have to go to jail, because in Dubai they do imprison people who spread fake news and misinformation, because they're a bit very particular about COVID-19. Um, Biases as well. Also, this one, Joey Trenius is a political figure in the Philippines. People call them out for this. So Ateneo is a leading institution in the Philippines. Somewhat an Ivy League here in the Philippines. So people took photos of the school, and it's color white. It's not color pink. So we fact check that as well, because he's an influential figure, and people do mistake that for a sort of endorsement. People will be misled. So simple ways, call in instead of call out. So this is the last part of my talk. Sorry, it took a long time to talk about fake news. I'm emphasizing calling in because in Filipino culture, people don't like to be put to shame in public. Unlike in other more confrontational cultures, Filipinos might feel offended when you call them out. That's why people are a bit comfortable being called out for fake news in their timelines. They would appreciate it if you do it privately. And most of these people are actually very unconscious. In my case, I didn't call them in. I called them out many times. Um, because I feel that people need to be called out in the public. But it took a long time to really change my family members and made them realize that they were consuming fake news about vaccines, about the current administration, and stuff like that. Then invest time and energy by organizing, communicating, and connecting to these people, because they might be just victims of the system or infrastructure that people with money have been set up to spread fake news. Know when to stop. I don't think that people can do fact checking all the time. Sometimes you have to rest and take a step back and invest other time in other things that might be a lot more productive or might be a lot more healthy for you. And lastly, report fake news and other suspicious materials to news organizations, Fact Check Philippines. Alter Media also launched their own campaign with Facts First PH, which we are also part of. You can also report to Rappler. You can also report to CNN Philippines, GMA News, if it's Philippine-related information. All of these organizations, or most of the news organizations, are now within our networks. So if you do see fake news, we can, contact them as soon as possible, and we can also alert some social media networks to check them out and to, flag them for fake news and misinformation. So thank you so much. I hope that you learned a lot about the nature of fake news and how it impacts everyday Filipinos here in the Philippines and even in the United States. So thank you so much, and I'll be entertaining questions. Thank you for the opportunity, Malaya.
Maraming salamat, Albert. Thank you so much. I learned so much from that presentation. Um, yeah, a lot of the conversations we've been having around within the Meta Facebook social media campaign is like towards the end of the presentation that you gave, which is how do we have conversations about media literacy with our community members. so that, you know, even if misinformation and disinformation exists, how are we able to support, you know, our elders to be able to distinguish between what is fact and what is not? So that was really very helpful. Thank you so much. Before we jump into the Q&A portion, again, please send your questions in the chat or to questions. I wanted to bring us to some of our calls to action today. So can you hit the next slide there? So one big thing that we are launching today is this open letter to Meta, or Meta Platforms, or Facebook. So Meta is the new name for the overall company that owns both Facebook and Instagram. This open letter is on Action Network, and we are listing out demands for Meta to take actions in light of the Philippine elections. That's, again, is in less than 100 days. So a lot of these demands are in line with the movement against disinformation in the Philippines, of which Fact Check Philippines is a part of, and also now Malaya Movement USA is a part of. And it's really an effort to have a conversation with Meta and Mark Zuckerberg to ensure that they do take action against disinformation in this really critical time in the Philippines. We're also asking people to really organize protest actions in front of Meta headquarters and offices across the United States to help support the demands of the letter, take them to the streets and ask them to stop the spread of disinformation in the Philippines. And again, this webinar is put on by Malaya Movement USA, specifically the Trolls and Tyrants Campaign Working Group. So if you're interested in learning more about the campaign that we have, the links will be shared in the chat below. But please join us. Please join an organization and join the fight against disinformation during this election season. I think, again, it'll be a really, it's one of the key playing fields for our candidates in this next few months, with the official campaign season actually beginning in a few days here. So yeah, now's the time to start having these conversations around, you know, what can we do in the fight against disinformation? So join an organization. I'm gonna keep clicking refresh on this open letter. It's gonna take a couple of seconds for you. There's 31 people here, so it would be great if by the end of this webinar we have 31 signatures that we can send to that we have by the end of the night. And then please share on your social media as well. We'll have graphics to share with everyone at the end of the night. So yeah, please share, please sign, and tell everyone you know to sign this letter. So yeah, on to some questions. We'll start off really easy, Albert. What is the difference between disinformation and misinformation?
All right. Misinformation is like you're unconscious that you're deliberately excluding or erasing some parts of the information. You might have just like heard it from somewhere, or you might just have been informed in a way that you don't have access to all of the information that's available. And I guess misinformation is a lot more common to people before fake news became popular, because they're not consciously, aware that much of what they're saying is actually incomplete information. So that's misinformation. It might also mean that, like what I showed earlier, like the picture of Bongbong Marcos, his photo, that can be classified as misinformation, but also disinformation. It's misinformation because people who might be sharing it might not be aware that that photo is a freshman photo. But the people who made that photo or like spliced the photo in the first place are the ones spreading disinformation, because they know that the photo is a freshman photo, but they will, splice it or they will cut it or crop it just to make it look like as if it's a graduation photo. So I think misinformation is more forgivable because people are unaware. But disinformation is like deliberately knowing all of the facts that are presented or are available, but you only choose to like highlight one fact or one part of the issue. Or you might also deliberately produce or manufacture, like, let's say, information or make fictional stories about certain events or deliberately try to change or alter some information about the issue or about the individual just to instigate hate or instigate admiration for that person. So I guess that's the difference. Like the misinformation part is like people being unconscious that they're doing it. The disinformation part is people know that it's already incomplete, but they're still going to do it because they have the intention of trying to instigate fear or anger or make people like someone or like something.
Yeah, thank you. I often see the two get mixed up in different places. So I think it's really good to distinguish between the two, and like it's really about the intent behind what they're sharing. So I think that's, yeah, thank you for that. Another question here. And again, please ask more questions in the chat. These have been coming through. So recently, I think in the last day or two, there's been developments around the Anti-Troll Act or the SIM social media registration bill. Is there anything you can share about that? What's your opinion on that, or you know, what's the word?
Yeah. So I guess we still don't have a stand as Fact Check Philippines, but we were able to discuss this with other partners within the network. And I think I personally, this is more of my personal stance. While I do see the good intentions behind bill or act that they want to pass, I don't think that it would really address the root causes of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news, which is obviously, even if you do have access to those SIM cards and they're all registered, people find other ways to make misinformation and disinformation. Like, what do you do if you get them caught, right? Will you imprison them? And I think for my personal stance and for Fact Check Philippines as well, we've been against governments trying to imprison people for fake news because governments can be represented by anyone. So what if the next person who will be in power and who will enforce these types of laws might do it to their own personal favor and might not be objective and fair about who to prosecute or not. So I guess the stance has also been always consistent that we have to focus first on making social media companies accountable because they've been doing it in the United States. They were able to do it in the United States. They slowed down the spread of misinformation and disinformation during the US elections. And they can do that for other elections as well. That can already significantly help people have not access to fake news and fake accounts. And I myself have been seeing the development so far. So I don't think that needs to go to the extent where you would have to force people to even register their social media accounts or their SIMs just to stop the spread of misinformation and disinformation. I think that's the first thing. But secondly, on a personal standpoint, again, and this does not represent my organization or the partners that I'm part with, I guess it's important for us to also invest in the educational system in the Philippines because, as I mentioned earlier, people are not that attuned or not that very familiar with reading as a culture or as a habit. They would rather consume things that are quickly consumed or that are more entertaining, and those are actually avenues for them to be, manipulated or to be exposed to fake news. So going back to the educational system, I think that people need to have access to tools that make them understand with what is fake news or not, because technologies that create fake news have been also improving. We have deep fakes, and you might have been familiar with that in the U.S. elections. I showed one of the examples of the deep fake, like their heads being cropped off and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to fact check that. And anyone can do that, even if your SIM is registered, your social media account is registered, people can still make that up, and they might not be accountable for it because they will use VPN or all of those materials that will make them protected or shielded from the authorities that are monitoring activity. So I guess that it has to go to how we improve the critical thinking skills of people, because fake news peddlers and fake news networks are also smart in improving how they spread this new type of fake news that can be undetectable. So I guess that's the stance that we have so far. I guess we have to wait for our other partners to have really a formal discussion and statement out there. So, but thank you so much for that question. And yes, it's an important issue. I hope it becomes an election issue.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, yeah, it really will be something to really follow. I think just considering the what's the word, sort of the dangers of red tagging and terror tagging already. I think this adds like a layer of concern for myself and other activists, I'm sure. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how it develops in this election period. I think we can do one more question and we'll let people go. It's Friday night here in the US, so might be good to get off Zoom after a long work week. So maybe the last question we'll do is, so this is more specifically about like Fact Check Philippines. The question is, does Fact Check Philippines have research or intelligence on the disinformation infrastructure of Marcos or of Duterte? Yeah, that's the question.
All right. So I guess because we're led by volunteers, we're a citizen fact checking organization, and most of us are actually professionals and students who might not be that familiar, have access to tools that really investigate who really runs these factories of trolls or fake news. So I guess the answer is no, we don't do that, because I guess the fear that we also have is we're not experts, and we might get scrutinized for doing something that's not our field. But our partners like Verifiles, Check.ph, Rappler, and also academics that we have access and links to have been doing a lot of research on fake news and troll accounts and those farms. One of the things that I was exposed to is that in 2018 or 2019, I was in a talk by Filipino researchers, PhD candidates from London, I guess so, or masteral candidates from London, and they were able to identify that these troll accounts, these fake news networks are actually controlled by big media companies as well, or big marketing and public relations firms, and they really make a lot of money out of it. So that's what their findings show. I guess and then after that, they were able to shut down networks that have been spreading Marcos propaganda. That's the first thing. And Rappler has been consistent in reporting these actions taken by big media platforms like Meta or Facebook. Recently, Twitter was also able to shut down around 200 or 300 accounts that have been only recently created and have been spreading propaganda that have been linked or that have benefited the Marcos campaign. We've also received a report of people. I think I guess we also received reports of people tracking down fake news networks or troll accounts from other countries. I I'm not sure if I'm right, but there was a report of people being based in Europe and being based in China operating these farms. So I guess that's what the experts are saying. I guess for our personal experiences, Fact Check Philippines, most of the materials that we notice have been actually been beneficial to the Marcos campaign. And Verifiles actually confirms that, because in 2021, the top one benefactor of fake news and misinformation, disinformation is actually Marcos. And actually, Sara Duterte and Rodrigo Duterte are actually far from him. So I guess while they are in the second and third spot, they're far with regards to the number of fact check reports that are being done. So in our case, from our experience from 2021 up to 2022, yes, we've been doing more and more Marcos fact check reports. With regards to the victims, the number one victim is presidential aspirant Lenny Robredo, according to Verifiles. The second is Manny Pacquiao or Isko Moreno. And the third is Manny Pacquiao or Isko Moreno. I'm not sure who came second or third. Uh, yeah, so but there are also reports when we met at Movement Against Disinformation, we were able to also identify Lenny Robredo, Sara Ilago as top victims of fake news and red tagging.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, makes sense to have these different sort of organizations really kind of focus in and hone in on the infrastructure of it all, given the sort of global scope uh, of something like that. So yeah, thank you so much. We have a few other questions, but maybe I'll just send those to you, Albert, and you can just respond, and we'll add them to the follow-up email that we send for this event. But yeah, thank you all so much. Can you hit the next slide? We'll just remind folks, these are our calls to action tonight. So it looks like we have 20 people. Let me just refresh real quick. 20 people have signed the Action Network. I think a few people have dropped off the call. But yeah, please, once you do sign it, share it on your social media. The catch-22 of talking about the weaponization of social media, but needing to use social media is always really interesting. And yeah, join Malaya USA, join the campaign, and join an organization to fight disinformation during this election season. Can you hit the next slide? I think it's the last slide. Yeah, so yeah, join Malaya USA. Malaya USA just recently joined the movement against disinformation in the Philippines. So we're now in partnership with Fact Check Philippines officially under the banner of Movement Against Disinformation. So follow them on Facebook, follow Fact Check Phils on Facebook. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going. Social media, again, will play a key role in this election time. So be on the lookout for more information from us. And yeah, send out that letter to everyone and anyone you know. But thank you, maraming salamat, and good night. Good morning.
Thank you.